Welcome back to election night in Missouri, now by former Senator Claire Mccaskill. Thank you for joining us. It's good to have you with us. We're watching results come in from across the state. Election authorities counting the ballots. You're going to see some of those results flashing across your screen, and we'll get to them in a minute. How do you evaluate the Republicans running for the U.S. Senate?
Well, it's been a really interesting race, chaotic. I mean, I've never seen people more desperate for an endorsement. It felt like for most of the primary, everyone was just trying to circle around proving that they were deserving of the Trump endorsement. So for him yesterday to do an endorsement which basically guaranteed that he could claim that he created the winner by picking the two candidates that, I think in his opinion, were most likely to win. I think he had it right on one score. I think we probably will see a victory tonight by Eric Schmidt, but it was quite a primary that was all about trying to prove that you were the most conservative.
And perhaps the former president avoided tarnishing the value of his endorsement in not picking a loser, hedging his bets. He just endorsed Eric without attaching the last name. So if Eric Greitens wins, if Eric Schmidt wins, he can say, well, at least I didn't lose when I endorse somebody. We're going to get those results in any moment. At last count, Eric Schmidt did have a commanding lead, but we're nowhere near done yet. We are aware of some reports that have suggested that he's got this thing wrapped up. With 48 precincts reporting right now, Schmidt with a commanding lead nearing 50% of the vote total with 46%. Vicky Hartzler in a strong second percent with 22% of the race there. There were some Democrats who thought, hey, if Eric Greitens wins this thing, we might have a shot as a party of flipping that red seat, Roy Blunt's seat, blue. What is that challenge? How steep is that uphill climb for Democrats to win a Senate seat in Missouri in 2022?
I think it was 4 years ago when I felt it firsthand that Missouri had really moved towards a Donald Trump kind of politics. The cultural issues weigh so heavily, especially on people that don't live in the St. Louis and Kansas City areas. The people who live out in rural communities across the state, most of them have decided that the Democrats don't get them, don't feel their pain, are worried about something other than what their problems are. So I do think it's a tough road. It's not a road that I think is insurmountable in Missouri, particularly with what's going on with the Republican Party being so extreme. They have done some things that go so far, especially in areas of guns and things like women's reproductive health, that at a certain point in time, there's going to be some middle-of-the-road voters that just say we can't go there. They've gone too far.
And that might be where John Wood tries to clean up, if you will. He's already announced his independent candidacy for the U.S. Senate. We hope to hear from John Wood in our broadcast later tonight, and we thank you for joining us. You mentioned some of those challenges that are there for the party, and we're going to get to each of those races. I understand you haven't endorsed anyone in the Democratic primary. That race now over the polls are closed. But if you're building the strategy or you're writing the playbook for how a Democrat can win in Missouri in 2022, we've seen the strategy of Lucas Kunce, who pitches himself as this fighter. He uses that same language, almost stealing some of the Republican language about the vitriol and the rage. But he connects with some of that rural populism, right? He says, we're going to rage against the big corporations, the monopolies. He uses some of those words. And then Trudy Busch Valentine is selling a more polite version of politics, where she's the nurse. She's offering the salve, the ointment to this rage in our politics that we feel. Which of those two lanes do you think might be more effective in a general election, in a midterm? Do you see the voters more energy in that sort of statesman lane that Trudy Busch Valentine's trying to carve out, or in the populist rage against the machine side?
Well, I think Trudy Busch Valentine's strongest argument is, and she won't say it this way, but I can. I mean, if you have so much money in your family, you never have to work another day, how many women under those circumstances would go back to school and become a registered nurse? That says something about who she is, right? Because she didn't need to be a registered nurse. She didn't need to work. She had more money than she would need in time. So the fact that she did that and then used that nursing degree to help other people, I think is something that most Missourians, especially women, will relate to. And her having 6 children and having lost on to an addiction, which is very relatable to Missouri, I think she's got a lot of personal characteristics that will help her. For any Democrat, whether it's Lucas Coons or whether it's Trudy Bush Valentine, the fact that parents are afraid to send their kids to school because they get shot, the fact that rape victims terminate a pregnancy even if their rapist was their stepfather, and even if they're 10 or 11, 12 years old without violating the law, those kinds of issues, and health care. If the gas prices been going down now for over a month, if gas prices keep going down, if unemployment is very low, if the economy cooperates a little, some of these issues I think really resonate, particularly in suburban areas like St. Louis County and over in Kansas City and in some areas over there that are very suburban, and even in Springfield and Columbia. I think you could see it be a competitive race. Still an uphill climb, but I think it can be competitive.
Very interesting. We're hearing now from our reporter Justina Coronel out in the field embedded with the Trudy Bush Valentine campaign that St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones has just arrived there. Perhaps they are hoping, we know they're hoping for a victory speech there tonight, not a concession speech. We're waiting to see those results come in. We hope to bring you a more up-to-date look at those results in the Democratic primary. Also, all eyes on that Republican race to see if Eric Schmidt will indeed close it out. At last report, it looked like he had a commanding lead. Some of the other races on the ballot are in the congressional district, the 1st district, a district drawn for Democrats. Cori Bush on the progressive left, Steve Roberts in the moderate middle, but he's saddled with some explosive allegations of sexual assault there. How closely do you think Washington is watching that race? Democrats wanting to know if the energy is in the progressive left or if in the moderate middle. President Biden sort of held himself out to the electorate as that moderate, centrist Democrat. And here you have Cori Bush trying to still run and represent the far left wing of the party. Can you read into it on where the mood of Democrats are in a midterm election year? They're the party in power. The Democrats are. What kind of lessons might we see after all the votes are counted in that race of Cori Bush and Steve Roberts?
I don't know that the Cori Bush-Steve Roberts race is going to be a really good indicator of where the majority of Democrats are as it relates to who they want to be their standard bearer, particularly in a presidential race. Because there are complicating factors there. It's not just someone who has taken a very far left stand versus someone who has talked in more moderate terms about representing the district. But I think we'll know after tonight, because there's a lot of districts across the country where progressive candidates are up against slightly less progressive candidates. So we'll see at the end of the day, or the end of sometime tomorrow, next week, how all of those progressive candidates do across the country. But let me just remind everybody, there is a lot more that Cori Bush and Steve Roberts agree on than disagree on. The Democrats need to stay very focused on unity. There is a civil war in the Republican Party. I mean, I don't think Eric Schmidt would have been endorsed in a kind of buffoon endorsement by Trump if he had that he wouldn't vote for Mitch McConnell. So you've got something really on the national level where you're going to have McConnell Republicans versus Trump Republicans, and that's going to boil over. So if we can stay united in the Democratic Party, I think it will make a big difference on whether or not we can lead.
She's Claire Mccaskill, former Missouri Senator, joining us, and we're going to check back in with her throughout the night as she's with us. But also joining us now is someone who might look to run on that very division in the Republican Party that we heard about moments ago. That's John Wood. I'm told we have him on the line. He's running an independent campaign. He has the backing of Jack Danforth, hoping to run and unite some of the Republicans that might not cast a ballot in the direction of Donald Trump. That looks like John Wood joining us now from his home office. It looks like you're holed up there watching these results as we see them come in. Good to have you with us. Many of our viewers may know you were an attorney on the January 6th committee, stepping down to run for Senate in Missouri there. Why do you think Mike Pence didn't campaign for any of these candidates?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think Mike Pence decided he wanted to keep his powder dry. There's a good chance that he's going to run for president, and maybe he just didn't want to choose sides. But also, maybe he thought there weren't any really good choices. I mean, all three of the leading candidates on the Republican side are people who are so election deniers. They, in one way or another, have either try to or pledge that they will try to or both overturn the 2020 presidential election. And that's just wrong. The fact is, even though I'm a lifelong Republican, I recognize that Joe Biden won that election. And part of living in a democracy means we have to accept the results of election, even if our party doesn't win.
Is that your defining characteristic, that you think Donald Trump lost and Joe Biden won the election in 2020? Or is there some other way that your message distinguishes you from the field of Republicans or Democrats running in this race? How are you going to stand out to voters and pitch them a message that they can connect with?
It's much bigger than that. This is not about the 2020 election. This is about our Constitution and our democracy and healing our country. We are a very divided nation right now. We need leaders who are going to help bring us together rather than divide us for political purposes. And what I'm seeing from both of the major parties now is an effort to divide people for political gain. And there's a lot of posturing by candidates. And what we need these days, we need to start putting the grown-ups in charge and send people to Washington who are going to get things done, be part of a governing coalition, reach across the aisle when they need to get things done, rather than just posture so that they can score political points.
If you're just joining us, John Wood is an independent party candidate, not on the ballot in this primary race, but will ballot in November, just returning enough petition signatures to get ballot now. Joining us in studio is former Senator Claire Mccaskill.
John, I'm just curious, if you were to win that race, would you caucus with the Democrats or would you caucus with Republicans? Would you cast for a leader in the Democratic Party or a leader in the Republican
And I
Party?
continue to this day. But the race for the Republican nomination has become a race to the bottom, as evidenced by the behavior of the leading candidates in this silly game where they've been desperately trying to outdo each other to get Donald Trump's endorsement. And then some ridiculous news last night that he was just endorsing a generic Eric. So I am a Republican and will caucus with the Republicans, but I will reach across the aisle to work with Democrats to get things done for the people of Missouri, rather than just try to grind the Senate to a halt. You know, if the Senate just becomes the Bernie Sanders wing on the Democratic side and the Ted Cruz wing on the Republican side, nothing's ever going to get done, and our government won't work for the people. And we need people who are going to be grown-ups and are going to go to Washington to try to get things done.
We've seen several of these candidates running for the Senate on the Republican side make the argument that the January 6th committee is a waste of time. Voters don't want to hear from that. And in politics, do you believe that the voters are always right, kind of like in business, customers are always right? Or how do you convince Missouri voters, Republican voters, that the January 6th committee is a worthwhile use of time on Capitol Hill?
More important than protecting our democracy and Constitution. And what happened on January 6th was a tragedy, not just because of the physical attack on the Capitol. And to be clear, that was a tragedy because people died and law enforcement officers were injured, and so it was very serious. But it was more than just a physical attack on our Capitol. It was an attack on our democracy. It was a multi-pronged effort by President Trump to overturn the results of a valid election. And it could be more important than protecting our Constitution and our democracy. And that's why I think the work of the committee is so important. And, I've talked to a lot of people about it, and to many people who say they closely watch the January 6th by them. I find there are two kinds of people. There are the people who've been watching moved by it, or the people who say they just refuse to watch because they don't. I haven't heard anybody who said they've been watching and paying attention and were not moved by it.
Support of Mike Pence in your campaign?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And also, there's been this new formation party. They're calling themselves the Forward Party. I understand you're not aligned with them today, but are the conditions ripe or right of a third party to challenge this version of the party is going to continue to pledge its fealty to former president, question election results? Is it time for the formation of a new?
Well, something has to change in American politics. The voters do not want to be presented with the extreme parties and the divisiveness that they're getting from both parties. Of a third party, I guess I prefer something a little different, which is which to both of the major parties that they need to clean up their act, craziness, that they need to move more real choice, not the extremes that we have today. So third party isn't necessarily the best solution, but it is at least one option. Extremes they're getting right now from the major parties. But as I said, my goal is to win this race. If they want to win general elections, they have to start moving back towards the craziness.
All right, we're watching results come in tonight, and we're seeing that lead 43% of the vote in the Republican primary. Vicky Hartzler at 26. Those results in the Five on Your Side app, along with our broadcast here at the bottom of your screen. John Wood, before we let you go, and we're going to hear from Senator as well, who is backing your campaign, but I wonder if you at least steep uphill climb that you have. I don't know the last time a third party, independent candidates like Angus King or Bernie Sanders in their states, but it's pretty rare that a third party or independent candidate actually wins a statewide election like this. Acknowledge the difficulty there, and what is your campaign strategy? Eric Schmidt's the winner. You don't have someone with the baggage like Eric Greitens. How do you win? How do you convince enough Republicans in a red state to pick you and not someone like Eric Schmidt should he win tonight?
You certainly acknowledge that it's somewhat rare for an independent to win statewide. You got a couple of examples, but also Lisa Mccaskill did it, Joe Lieberman did it. But the main reason why it's going to work now is that these are extraordinary times. We're divided as a nation than we've ever been during my lifetime, and nowhere more evident than in this Missouri Senate race, where we're seeing a lot of extremism and a lot of divisiveness, a lot of political posturing. So I really think there's a thirst among Missouri voters for something different. With the fact that I have the support of somebody like Senator Jack Danforth, who is very good reason, I think means that I'm going to win this race.
As the rest of us watch these results come in, we'll see if Eric Schmidt does indeed has the lead in that Senate Republican primary race. Also, Lucas Kunz and Trudy Bush Valentine in the Democratic primary there. We're going to have those in just a moment. Before we do, we want to listen to on why he's backing John Wood. When we come back from this, we're going to have analysis from former Senator Claire Mccaskill with us here in studio. Forth joins us now from his law offices in Clayton. Senator, it's always good to have of the Republican primary and the candidates in it in 2020.
All the candidates, you one of the very minor candidates, but they were all relentlessly, they were all dividing. They were all, to an amazing, very violent terms. They took the view that they wanted to go to Washington with or packing their AR-15. It was what's happened to politics now in America, but where it's belligerent, it's designed to party by appealing, making people angry. So it's what's happened by the extremes of politics.
It's a topical question whether leaders lead their base or a base leads them is always right. Do you find that's true in politics, that the voters are into the fight, if at all, really just a sign of that free market of politics as usual?
Well, I think they should be today, but because politics, all of us know people whose families have broken up because of political fighting. The kind of rage of it all now. Question. Look, I think that we have to our essential national purpose ourselves together. That's Constitution was for. That's our national motto, E pluribus unum. It's our commitment, and it should be the commitment to everybody who has any kind of voice, including the average citizen, people going to the polls, but certainly people in public, people with the big megaphones of BT politics. Their message should be as George Washington's message way back then. The country together, of not just dividing in the earth that we have today.
Of course, Abraham Lincoln often annoying his enemies by making them his friends, overcoming division to find common ground.
Very famously, Lincoln said, as the country was, 7 states had seceded when he made his first inaugural address. And what he said, we're not enemies, we are friends. We must not be enemies. Called on us to appeal to the better angels, as he called angels of our nature. Who do you see in politics who's appealing to the better angels of our nature? And that's why I'm all for John Wood. I mean, that is him. That heart, that's his ability, that's his whole campaign, is pulling our country together. It's bigger than me, it's bigger than any issue.
And we're going to hear from John later in this broadcast about his campaign, his message as that third-party lane opens up into November. You've probably seen by now that dozens of former Republicans are all forming this new sort of centrist party. They're called Forward Party, not left, not right, but forward. Clearly, you ripe for a third-party challenger in Missouri's Senate race.
He's independent, and I think that's different because platform and a host of positions, one thing or another. But an independent candidate he is a Republican. He makes no bones about that. His whole motivation is trying to be a divider, certainly not a bomb thrower with tactic of politics.
But aren't you going to need a message beyond just I'm nice, or a message beyond there, doesn't there?
Yeah, it's certain. I mean, that's not bad at all. He's a Republican. He's a traditional Republican. He would go to the Senate to do business, to do the work of legislating, to solve problems, and not just speeches and make publicity for yourself. I mean, what's happening now in the U.S. Senate, and I spent years of my life there, but I think now it's just a bunch of operators who are trying to get PR for them to really do anything. They don't have anything that they accomplish. They don't pass bills, releases, or they'll introduce bills that are going as well. Government isn't going to work that way. Well, I want to go to Washington with a blowtorch, or else the word fight. I mean, think about how often you hear the word smoothly in Washington now. I mean, things are real work. I got to go there and wreck things. Absolutely crazy. And if you want somebody who is in the U.S. Senate who could be at all effective, you certainly want somebody who can work with other people and brass knuckles and blowtorches and so on.
I think this is our first time doing this. We have a candidate on the back. Ray, it's good to have you with us. We're going to get results from Schatz, and a number of other Republicans to join us make it. We do have news in the Senate Republican primary. Bill has conceded in that race. He has now bowed out early for us to make an official call, but we can report a commanding lead. He is right now easily in first place. At last total, Eric Schmidt with 42% of the vote to Vicky Hark-Wrighton's fading fast into that 18% category now, and we hope to have an update on that Democratic versus Trudy Bush Valentine. We don't know that yet, but one of the early answers, Mayor Tashara Jones joining the Trudy Bush Valentine campaign party may be in the works. All right, Ray Reid joining us. You're still feeling it? You're still waiting to see the outcome of tonight?
It was definitely worth it. Throughout this entire hired by folks like Senator Mccaskill, Jason Kinder, Stephen Weather, appeal to the best of my community, and attract a lot of attention on the national level and here in addition. So my number one goal was to bring as many young people as possible, adults. But I've just been so proud. We're really something special. I believe that when we all participate, not even this.
We often talk about representation in politics and that the country needs to see more, but they're just by nature. You look at the Senate and you have a lot of people there who lived experiences when they had to really earn a paycheck back home. You made an interesting comment during your campaign that you'd be the first Missouri who went through active shooter drills in school. I imagine there are from your generation that you were hoping to bring with you on the campaign. Did any of that play on TikTok campaigning?
I was. So, the theme of wait around for someone else to fix the issue, we kind of just go out there and do it ourselves. A few months ago, I went to Washington with David Hogg, a friend of mine. The House and Senate members like Senator Lisa Murkowski or Chris Murphy, even Mitch McConnell, and Mitch McConnell's Mitch McConnell. We met with those guys doing the job that Congresswoman Ann Wagner should also building consensus around common sense gun control. And we ended up getting the bipartisan framework, which turned into the Bipartisan Communities Act, which is now the Bipartisan Safer Communities Law. And that bill wasn't everything, but it was something. And the alternative to doing something to do nothing. And if we did nothing, we would only be inviting what had to happen again when kids go back to school in the fall. There's still more work to do on gun control, and I'm fully committed to making sure that we address that issue.
We have a candidate for office, Ray Reid, here, and your name flash across the screen at the bottom as we watch these results come in. We're going to see what voters have decided here. Also, Senator Claire Mccaskill joining us as well on the spot. Who'd you like in the Democratic primary for Senate?
So my vote, Trudy Bush Valentine got my vote today. I know she has what it takes to beat whoever the rookie is, and I'll fight like hell to make sure that she's the next senator from the state of Missouri.
Well, anything in the results that you've seen so far tonight? It's early to call the race right now. There are some making their predictions. They think Eric Schmidt may have pulled this out. We're going to for sure in the minutes and hours to come. Any surprises so far?
I'll bet you $5 that it's Eric Trudy Bush Valentine that will be on the ballot with John Wood in November. I think the one pundit always says, "I've seen enough." Well, I think that's what's going to happen. I think the one thing I want to say to Rick is, if you don't win tonight, I want you to say right now that you will recruit other candidates that are in just one thing our party needs. It is younger now. And part of that is just the nature of it, is that to be a leader, relationships. But like 80, right?
All right.
From Bernie Sanders, who's older than Joe. Bernie Sanders is older than Joe. But it is one of those things. So I was really proud of you when you worked on my campaigns, and because I think you're very talented, and I think the country needs you. So
Here, I will still be involved, and I'll do everything I can to help as many.
You're watching the recruiting process play out on our live stream. Very interesting to see. Senator Mccaskill, you made a comment about Democrats in control in Congress. What kind of I know you're connected to people on Capitol. Pressure do you think, if any, is President Biden under to step aside in 2024? Let a yes at the party.
I think if any president of the United States is under this pressure. It doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. There's a new crisis, and every day there's a new radical shortcoming, his or her downfall.
But
Hope
pressure to
someday
step
we'll say her.
aside is different, right? Incumbents election almost always.
Well, not always.
Almost always.
I think a lot of it will depend on his inner circle, his family, depend on where he is in terms of his numbers and where is how viable is he. I honestly don't believe in my heart that, again, if he's not confident he can carry the flag for the Jim Impossible because he cares more about the policies position as president. So I think he'll do the right thing. Even if he's decided not to run, he would never say that now for the remaining years of his presidency. I don't have any inside information not to run, but because he says he's running doesn't necessarily
To be the lame duck president and let the cat out of the bag, so to speak.
could conceivably be president for another 6 years. It's very hard if everybody knows you're a short time.
Joined now by Senator Claire Mccaskill and Ray Reed, who's also watching the results. In the 1st Congressional District, we hope to bring you results there as well and have coverage from some of our reporters who are out at those races. They're watching some of those results moments ago that, in fact, Lucas Kuntz, his team, his campaign until at least 9 o'clock at the earliest, they're trailing in that Democratic primary. We're going to right now to see where the Democratic race stands. It's tightening. 26% of precincts reporting Trudy Bush Valentine with a 10%, 35 to 35, and Spencer Toder in a distant 3rd place with Carla Coffey Wright with 4%, local activist Carla. Those are some of the most recent results. But Trudy Bush Valentine near a 50% threshold, where if she were to cross it, that would be about as close. It's too early to call that race as well. So we may hear their campaign feels good about it. We have also been able to confirm Blaine Luetkemeyer will win re-election to a 7th consecutive congressional district. That's not much of a surprise. He had outraged the total. Blaine Luetkemeyer is the projected winner. We are a little sound there. Blaine Luetkemeyer, Missouri Congressional District. And that's one of those districts where it's 2 seats in Missouri that are drawn to elect Democrats. How hard would it be for a Democrat, any Democrat district drawn to protect an incumbent? We saw a Democrat could win here. He told me he was wrong. Why?
He's wrong, Louis. He doesn't know Missouri or St. Louis. And I'm in the district, even in Warren, Franklin counties, really all across. People want to write those rural areas off for Democrats, but I believe that those folks are necessarily hard to reach. They just often feel hardly reached. Get out there like Senator Claire Mccaskill did twice for the United States Senate. Make those folks feel heard. They'll send you back. They'll send you to public office.
Make those folks feel heard. And I noticed there's a twinkle in your talks. You seem to have some pride and invested his campaign. What is the pitch? How do you get people off the sidelines into running for office? Whether it's people watch this stuff. Politics ain't beanbag. You pose your life to a lot of public scrutiny and criticism. How do you recruit people to run in a heated political climate?
Well, it depends. I mean, there has to be something that people really care about. Healthcare. It might be protecting Social Security. It might be their sick of paying $600 a month for insulin if they have diabetes. The fact that the Supreme Court just took away freedom of women that they had had in this country for 50 years. Up the notion of precedent and controlling precedent. Now we have states like Missouri and other places that not only banning late-term abortions, not only requiring people have to have permission of parents, they are going so far that the victim of an incest, of a crime, pregnancy, no matter how old they were. It is so extreme. That motivates people, really motivates people. And I think what's watching tonight is looking to see what happens in Kansas. I think in St. Louis County, less than a 30% turnout in this primary. That's pretty bad for a democracy that we have less than 30% of the eligible vote primary election. In Kansas, where they have this issue on about reproductive freedom and about women's ability to control, there's evidently going to be a record greater than even in 2008.
In the primary.
And they never have big primaries in Kansas because usually vote in primaries in Kansas. They outnumber Democrats 2-1. And so it will be, I think what you'll see in Kansas, if this turns out that this record turnout occurred, that's what motivated. I mean, Ray was part of an army of young people. We knocked on more doors at 18 than any campaign in the country because we had so many people, and there was a lot at stake. Donald Trump had just got elected president. People were really worried about what Donald Trump would do. As it turned out, probably for good reason. So we had a lot of people volunteer. So sometimes it's an issue, but there has to be passion.
If St. Louis County, that has, of course, a lot of suburban voters in it, only turns out, does that suggest that Democrats are deflated? General election in a midterm, you're going to see more than 27% turnout, but we're seeing a bigger turnout. If reproductive rights and abortion, why do you think turnout is so low?
I think it's in their lives right now. I think people it's kind of a hot mess in Washington. It's a hot mess. Knows what the truth is. Nobody can agree on what the facts are. I think of what difference does it make. But primaries I will have a much better turnout in the general, but primaries are always the lowest.
Can I add to that?
Go ahead.
I think part of the job as Democrats also is to do a better job at communicating and the story of the Republican Party. We made this amount of progress in the last 2 years under President Biden, progress over the next 2 years. And the story of the point of that Republican Party is to stand in opposition to all the progress for the next 2 years. I haven't read Ann Wagner's website, but I guarantee it says I'm going to stop AOC or Democrats from doing X, Y, and Z. We have to tell the story. These Republicans, they don't actually want to do anything. I'm still waiting on that Republican health care plan.
Very interesting. We're going to hear from Ann Wagner and whoever the winner of the second congressional Democratic primary could be. Could be Trish Gunby in the weeks and months to come. We do it on the campaign side as we're checking with these results. Nearly 1 in 3 votes have been primary, the Senate primary there, and Eric Schmidt still holding his commanding lead with 40 of the vote in the Senate Republican primary. Vicky Hartzler in second place with victory very nearly out of reach at just 9 threshold, and again with 30% of the precinct, with just 19% of those votes behind his name here at this hour. Again, there have already been some pundits to suggest that, you heard it here from Claire Mccaskill on our desks. Enough votes for the support here. Right now it is a commanding lead. Also, the most recent result from the, we're going to actually check in with that in just a moment, but let's go to the auditor's race. There's a lot about this. Scott Fitzpatrick, the treasurer, with 64% agrees, 36%. We don't have a reporter there, but some next auditor in Missouri, and it appears that Greek, in just a moment, Holden Kerwicki is at that race. We're going to hear former governor who may be speaking. There are a lot of people, of course, who might handle an election loss. He has rejected the idea that lost in 2020. He has based much of his campaign around the false claims and was stolen from Donald Trump. In fact, even featuring some films that suggested that very thing, that the election was stolen from Trump in 2020, and preparing to speak to his supporters in just a few minutes as he trails by in the Republican primary. We are going to, down here in just a moment, we hope to have some results for you, and certainly tonight at 10 o'clock when we join you on KSDK. We will have reports from our reporters embedded with the campaigns across the state. Real core, we leave Ray Reid still waiting to learn the results. How are you feeling about the results, the campaign? Do you think you had a shot at closing this out and winning tonight? What do you expect?
All out on the field, and that's all we can do. Whether it's me, Representative Gumby, or just to be clear, I mean, before the race started, I respected Meyer now, and I'll
jump in here real quick. We do have some news to report to you now. NBC News is for Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt will represent the Republican Party. He is not projecting that Eric Schmidt has an insurmountable lead. And even as the likely finished in second place, Eric Greitens in third. But Eric Schmidt, the man from the Attorney General's office, who sued the country of China for what who sued local school districts for trying to protect kids. Of lawsuits, he said on the campaign trail down the stretch, his job is to wake up, will represent the Republican Party going to the U.S. Senate against, we'll find out, could it be Trudy Bush Valentine in that matchup? And we already heard tonight from independent candidate already on the ballot. But Eric Schmidt, that is the breaking news, the winner of the Senate Republican primary. The polls seem to show down the stretch. Claire Mccaskill joining us now. You know what it's like to be in the war room of a campaign night, to watch these results come in. What are these other candidates going through right now? Vicki, did she come in with a concession speech, you think?
Oh, I'm sure she will. You know, the interesting thing is both Billy Long and Vicki Hartzler gave up their Congress to take on this race, and so it is the era for them. It's unlikely after you lose a race like this again, and so I'm sure that tired and wants to give her each and go home and put her feet up. At least that's the way I felt.
Some insight there and candor from Claire Mccaskill. Ray Reid, thank you for joining us. We're going to stay out. We hope you'll join us on our broadcast on KSDK 5 on your. Thank you to Ann Stegan and Jacob Korth who worked behind the scenes to put this for joining us. We'll have more live election results for